Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of I've Been Playing. Today we are going to talk about the game The Medium. The Medium is the latest game developed by Bloober Team, who have also developed Layers of Fear 2, and most recently the Blair Witch game. And as is their wont, it's another horror game, kind of psychological horror game, with a little bit more of a puzzle side and more exploration side than maybe the previous ones. Except maybe Blair Witch, there was more of it in that one. But it's still probably the most puzzly of all of them. And this time you are placed in the shoes of a medium, which means that you can see in two different worlds, the normal world and the supernatural world, and you can solve puzzles in both or use both to solve puzzles. That is the general idea. So oftentimes the screen will split into two separate screens, kind of like you're playing couch co-op, except that you're controlling both of them. Thankfully not independently. If you walk in one most of the time, if you walk in one, you walk the same place and way in the other, unless you're doing an out-of-body experience, which is when you just go into your spirit supernatural form and go around in that world. This is used mainly to bypass doors that are locked in the real world, but that are just doorways in the supernatural one. Or in one particular section, bypass, a part of the floor that's been destroyed in real life, but not real life. Anyway, we're already getting a little bit into the mechanics of the game. So obviously a lot of the marketing and a lot of the attention was brought to this fact that you can and do and have interactions in both the real and supernatural world, and that things in one part of the screen will not be appearing or happening on other parts of the screen, whereas other things will, and things look very different. And there are several times throughout the game where this happens, where you go into a kind of a split screen mode and you have to, like I said, solve puzzles, but it didn't do it nearly as much as I thought the game was going to. For as much as it was billed as, it's going to be split screen, I thought it was going to be this way for most of the game, and I feel like it probably wasn't. It might have been about half and half, but I'm not actually sure. It feels like it might have been 60-40 or even 70-30, the degree that you were in the real world. And despite the fact that there's a whole thing in this game about running away from a demon, essentially, it's what it looks like, it's what it is, and that comes from the supernatural world. It shows up, it stalks you, you have to hide from it or run away from it, depending on what section of the game you're in. And it's brought up and used several times, but that's kind of the main scare, really, in the supernatural world. There are some moths that can take your health away, which I don't know if it counts as scary, but it does, hurt you, so I guess that counts. But honestly, I can only think of one jump scare that ever happened in the supernatural world, and it did get me, to be fair, but I would have expected more, especially based on Bloober Team's previous work. I expected more jump scares. Not that I'm a huge fan of jump scares. It depends on how you do them and how they're worked in and whether they're telegraphed or not. Like, I always talk about how I love Alien Isolation, and if you break it down, Alien Isolation is basically just jump scares, but the fact that most of them are so unpredictable is the reason it's so scary. I do expect jump scares, especially from a Bloober Team game, and that's not a rag on them or anything, it's just Layers of Fear especially was very jump scare heavy. Blair Witch, to a point, was very jump scare heavy. Observer, which is another game they did, I believe, also had jump scares? And also had a stalking monster, if I remember correctly. I never ended up finishing that one. I couldn't get past the stalking monster part. So a lot of these things are kind of staples of their work, but I feel like there weren't as many jump scares as I was expecting. There also wasn't as much interaction with the supernatural world as I was expecting either. It was there, it was certainly used quite a lot, but a lot of it was just kind of to solve puzzles in the real world, which is an interesting concept, don't get me wrong, but I feel like there was some wasted potential with the dual world thing and the split screen especially. And about the split screen, it's definitely an interesting concept. I kind of like how it worked out, but because a lot of the time I was looking for things, collectibles or puzzle elements, I found it very hard to concentrate because I had to go around the area one time looking at one part of the screen and around the area again looking at another part of the screen because I couldn't focus on both at once. Now that may just be me not being able to focus on two different parts of the screen at once, or just, you know, if I focus too much attention on one part, I'm not paying attention to the other part and I miss things. But it could be a little confusing. There were also some times where, I don't know, there were a couple of times where it felt like it didn't respond to what I wanted it to respond to. The controls, that is. But overall, it was pretty spooky, it was pretty interesting. You know, there's a mystery of, I didn't even go into the story, so you start out the game and you kind of get introduced to the idea of her being a medium. What's her name? Marianne. Forgot her name there for a minute. So you get introduced to the idea of her being a medium because she apparently works at a funeral home and her adoptive father has passed away. And he shows up in, you know, spirit form. So that's kind of your first introduction, you the player, your first introduction to the supernatural world as he shows up, and you have to help him move on to the next world. But then you get a call from somebody named Thomas who tells you that something is breaking out and you need to come help at the Niwa Resort, which has been abandoned for an unspecified number of years. By the end of the game, you can kind of guess roughly how many years, not specifically, but there are things that happen that obviously I'm not going to get into because story reasons, that by the end of the game you'll have at least a rough estimate of how long this place has been destroyed, and you'll also, you know, eventually learn what happened there because there's something called the Niwa Massacre, which happened and is kind of related to the whole story as well. So that's the motivation for going to this spooky abandoned resort in the middle of the woods in the first place, which is a good setup. You know, I think overall, I enjoyed the game. I thought it was a good, fun game. I don't know necessarily that there's much replay value in it. I managed to get almost all of the trophies. I was playing this on PS5. I managed to get almost all of the collectibles and trophies on a first go, so, you know, if you're careful and you're a completionist, you can probably do one playthrough and it's fine, because it's a good game, but I don't know that I personally, at least, think it's good enough to play through more than once, because you already kind of know the story. Like I said, if you collect all of the collectibles the first time, there's not even that draw. It's kind of a one-time experience thing, and then you're done and you're out. Also, I don't know that it would be worth it because it has the mandatory stealth sections, and they're not as bad as they could be, but they're still there. But it was fun and interesting and a good story, and it would make a great movie actually as well. Not that I'm suggesting they do that. It's a good game experience. I don't think they should turn it into a movie. You should not turn everything into a movie, but it's a very cinematic experience, I think, is probably what I'm going for there. And if you like psychological horror or any of their past work, you're probably gonna enjoy this, and I probably recommend it. Those are my thoughts on the medium. Let me know what you think of the game down in the comments below if you've played it or if you want to. And I hope you enjoyed this. If you did enjoy this, consider subscribing. I do one of these every Monday, and I will see you next time.